The quiet man with a secret warmth. The night was cold. Not the kind of cold that bites your skin, but the one that seeps into your bones. The kind that whispers loneliness, even when you're surrounded by people. It was the premiere of a much-anticipated movie in downtown Los Angeles. Flashes from cameras painted the street in bursts of white light, and cheers echoed from the barricades where fans waited, hoping for a glimpse of someone they adored. Most of them had been waiting for hours, some all day. But one girl stood out. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't holding a phone up or waving a sign. Instead, she stood silently near the edge of the crowd. She wore a worn-out hoodie, far too thin for the icy wind. Her lips were blue, her hands shaking as she tucked them deeper into her sleeves. She looked like she didn't belong, like she hadn't planned to be there, but something stronger than logic had brought her anyway. Keanu Reeves had just stepped out of his car. The crowd erupted. People shouted his name. Phones shot into the air, and security tightened around him. He smiled that quiet, humble smile of his, nodded gently, and began signing autographs. There was nothing flashy about him. No arrogance, no rush. Just calm, steady kindness. As he moved from person to person, his eyes scanned the crowd, perhaps out of habit, perhaps for something else. And then he saw her. He paused. His bodyguards didn't notice, but he did. He noticed the girl with the trembling lips and sunken eyes. She wasn't holding anything to sign. She didn't even raise her head. But Keanu stepped out of line. He veered off the red carpet, away from the cameras, and walked straight toward her. At first, she didn't realize it. She only looked up when the cheering stopped around her and everything went quiet. There he was, just a few feet away. Her breath caught. She looked down quickly, embarrassed, afraid she was in the wrong place. But he didn't stop walking. He reached her, and without saying a word, he gently pulled off his coat. It was a thick black woolen coat, far too elegant for the rough sidewalk she stood on. He wrapped it around her shoulders, carefully like you'd wrap a child who had fallen asleep. His hands were warm. She looked up again, eyes wide and watery. "You looked cold," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Her body trembled, not just from the cold, but from shock. Cameras started flashing again. Someone shouted his name. But Keanu didn't look away from her. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lila," she managed to say, voice cracking. He smiled. "Lila. That's a beautiful name." Tears welled up in her eyes. This wasn't just about a coat. It wasn't even about the cold. It was about being seen, about being treated like a human being when the world had forgotten her. No one had spoken her name in days, maybe weeks. But here was a man the world adored, and he was standing in front of her like she was the only one that mattered. He didn't ask for her story. He didn't need to. But if he had, she might have told him that. She'd run away from a broken home 3 weeks ago. That she had been sleeping in shelters when she could, on benches when she couldn't. That tonight, she had walked for miles just to see him. Not for a selfie, not even for a memory, but for hope. Just a glimpse of someone who reminded her that good men still existed. And now, he was standing in front of her, giving her his warmth. Security rushed over, worried about the cameras catching too much. One of them whispered something in his ear, but Keanu shook his head. "I'll be right there," he said gently, never taking his eyes off Lila. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is my team's number," he said. "They'll help you. Tell them I sent you." Lila held the paper like it was gold. "Thank you," she whispered. Keanu gave her a small nod, then stepped back onto the carpet. The world roared again, as if trying to fill the silence he had left behind. But for Lila, everything else faded. The coat wrapped around her didn't just carry warmth. It carried dignity. It carried the message that she mattered. For the rest of the night, Keanu never spoke about it. He didn't mention it in interviews, didn't post it online. To him, it wasn't a gesture worth bragging about. It was just what you do. When you see someone cold, you give them warmth. What he didn't know was that the girl he had helped was about to change everything. A coat, a card, and a chance. The night had ended, but the warmth from the coat stayed with Lila longer than she expected. She clutched the folded paper tightly in her hand, afraid to open it too soon. The wind still whispered through the city streets, but for the first time in weeks, she wasn't afraid. She found a corner by a closed bookstore and sat down, the thick coat wrapped around her small frame like armor. As the early morning light crept into the sky, she finally unfolded the paper. The handwriting was neat and simple. A name, a number, and 3 words beneath it. "Tell them I care." Lila blinked, rereading it again and again. "Not we care. Not a team will help." He wrote, "I care." Her hands trembled again, but this time it wasn't from cold. It was fear. Fear that maybe this wasn't real. That maybe she would call, and the voice on the other end would laugh. Maybe it was all just a kind lie. But the coat said otherwise. She stood up slowly, the coat dragging slightly behind her. She didn't know where to go, didn't know who this number really belonged to, but something inside her whispered, "You don't walk away from a miracle." She used a public phone near the metro station. Coins clinked in and her fingers hesitated over the numbers. But finally, she pressed them one by one, heart pounding harder. With each beep, it rang once, then twice. Then a voice, clear, calm, professional. "Reeves Foundation, good morning." Lila froze. She had no idea what to say. "Hello? Is someone there?" The voice asked. Lila took a deep breath. He gave me this number, last night. He said you could help." The woman on the line paused for just a moment. "Are you Lila?" Tears immediately welled up in Lila's eyes. "Yes. We've been expecting your call. Can you come to our office?" "We'll send a car if you tell us where you are." The words didn't feel real. She gave them the street and sat down again, not even trying to understand what was happening. A car? An office? She had been invisible for so long, even street. Signs ignored her. And now someone was coming for her? The car arrived 20 minutes later. Black, simple, quiet. The driver stepped out, a middle-aged man with a kind smile, and opened the door for her. "You must be Lila," he said. "Mr. Reeves asked us to make sure you get everything you need." Those words hit harder than expected. Inside the car, everything was clean, warm, and smelled faintly of coffee. She sat stiffly, unsure where to place her hands, afraid to touch anything. The driver didn't speak unless she did, and somehow that made her feel safe. The building they arrived at wasn't fancy. It looked like a quiet clinic or an old library. A woman stood at the door, holding a clipboard and wearing a soft beige sweater. She smiled the moment she saw Lila. "Welcome," she said. "I'm Dinah. Come in, sweetheart." Lila followed, her inside, heart still pounding, unsure if this was a dream she would wake from. The office wasn't like the cold government places she had been to before. No metal chairs, no long lines, just soft lighting, quiet voices, and the scent of something baking in a nearby room. Dana led her into a small room with a couch, a table, and a tray with hot tea and cookies. "We're not here to ask questions," Dana said gently. "We're just here to help. If you want to talk, you can. If not, we'll still listen." Lila looked around, unsure what to say. It was all too much, too sudden. She sat down slowly and picked up the cup with both hands. It burned a little, but it felt good. Real. "He gave me his coat," Lila whispered. He didn't even ask my name first. Dana nodded. He does that. Sees people the way others don't. Tells us to do the same. Lila looked down at the cup. Her voice trembled. Why me? Dana reached across the table and gently touched her hand. Because he was once someone who felt unseen, too. Lila didn't ask more. She didn't need to. For the first time, someone had seen her. Someone had remembered her name before she even said it. She spent the next few hours with Dana, filling out forms that didn't feel like judgment. She was offered a warm shower, new clothes, and a bed for the night. Not in a shelter, but in a small guest room upstairs, clean, quiet, safe. As she curled up under a real blanket, wearing pajamas that actually fit, she stared at the ceiling and let the tears come. Not from pain, not from fear, but from relief. From hope. She didn't know what tomorrow held, but she knew who gave it to her. And somewhere across the city, Keanu Reeves was sitting in a quiet room of his own, not saying a word to anyone about what he'd done. He didn't need to. The past. She tried to forget. The morning sun peeked through the thin curtains, painting soft lines of gold across the small room where Lila slept. For a moment, she didn't move. Her breathing was calm, her body warm under the heavy blanket. It felt like another world, far from the street corners and sleepless nights, far from the fear of being seen. Or worse, ignored. But dreams end eventually. When she opened her eyes, the room was still there, still warm, still safe. For the first time in weeks, she hadn't woken up to the sound of footsteps, sirens, or angry voices. Instead, she heard birds, the faint sound of someone laughing downstairs, the smell of toast drifting through the air. She sat up slowly. A soft knock came at the door. Lila? Dana's voice was gentle. Breakfast's ready. Come down when you're ready. Lila stood and walked over to the small mirror on the palm wall. The girl staring back at her looked cleaner now, but the shadows under her eyes were still there. The pain didn't wash off that easily. Downstairs, the room was filled with soft chatter. 2 other girls around her age sat at a table eating eggs and toast. They looked up when she entered, not with judgment, just curiosity. One of them smiled and waved her over. I'm Rosa, she said. This is Maya. You're new? Lila nodded, still unsure if her voice would hold steady. Don't worry, Rosa said with a grin. We all came in shaking. Give it a day or 2. You'll be laughing like the rest of us. Maya chuckled softly. Or crying. Either way it helps. Dana walked over with a plate and sat it in front of Lila. Eat what you can. Then we'll talk if you're ready. Lila ate in silence, grateful for every bite. Warm food didn't just fill her stomach. It reminded her she was still alive. Still real. After breakfast, Dana led her into a small room with soft chairs and a window that looked out onto a tiny garden. You don't have to tell me anything you don't want. 2, she said. But when you're ready, I'm here. Lila looked out the window. The garden was quiet, peaceful. She took a deep breath. I ran away, she said softly. 2 months ago, from home. Dana nodded slowly. Was someone hurting you? Lila shook her head. Not like that. Just, no one cared. Mom left. When I was 11. Dad stopped talking after that. He'd just drink and stare at the TV. I tried to stay, really. But it was like I was invisible. Dana didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions. I started skipping school, stayed out too long. One day, I didn't go back, just kept walking. No one even called to ask where I was. Her voice broke. She turned her face away. I slept in parks, shelters when they had space, sometimes with people who offered a couch, but they always wanted something later. Dana's eyes didn't change. No pity, no shock, just a calm, steady presence. And then I saw the post about the movie premiere. Lila continued. I didn't even care about the movie. I just wanted to see him, Keanu. He always seemed like someone who cared. Someone real. And he saw you, Dana said gently. Lila nodded. I wasn't even in the main crowd. I was just standing there, thinking maybe I'd turn back. Then he came straight at me. I thought maybe I was dreaming. You weren't, Dana said. He saw you because you mattered. Not because of how you looked, not because of what you had, but because you were there, and hurting. Tears rolled down Lila's cheeks. Why does he care? He doesn't even know me. He doesn't need. 2, Dana said. Kindness doesn't wait for permission. It just shows up when someone's brave enough to act. Lila looked down at her hands. For the first time, they weren't shaking. Do you think I can ever get out of this mess? Be someone better? Dana smiled. You already are. You just need to remember it. Later that day, Lila met with a counselor, filled out a few forms for a temporary ID, was shown a list of nearby schools and programs she could join. But the most surprising thing came at the end of the meeting. The counselor handed her a letter. This arrived this morning, she said. For you. Lila stared at the envelope. Her name was written in the same neat handwriting from the coat's note. She opened it slowly, hands trembling again. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Dear Lila, I'm glad you called. I want you to know you're not alone anymore. Sometimes the world forgets people who don't shout. But I heard you anyway. You're strong for making it this far. Now it's time to find your light again. You deserve warmth, peace, and everything good. This coat is just the beginning. The rest is up to you. But I believe in you. Lila pressed the letter to her chest. For the first time in months, she smiled. Steps toward the light, the days that followed felt strange to Lila. Almost too good to be true. Each morning, she woke up in a clean bed. Her name was spoken with kindness. People smiled when they saw her. There were no locked doors, no one yelling, no one telling her she was a burden. But even in that safety, her heart carried a weight. Trust, after all, doesn't grow overnight. Not when you've been invisible for so long, Dana noticed. Healing isn't a straight line, she said one morning as they sat together in the garden. Some days you'll feel strong. Other days you'll want to disappear again. Both are okay. Lila looked down at the flowers blooming beside her. Bright colors, soft petals, things she hadn't noticed in a long time. I still get scared, Lila whispered. Good, Dana replied. It means you're still feeling, still alive. But there was one person Lila kept thinking about. One face that kept returning every time she closed her eyes. The man in black who saw her in a sea of faces. The man who gave his coat without asking for anything back. The man who wrote, I care. Keanu Reeves. She hadn't seen him again since that night, hadn't spoken to him, but somehow he still felt close. Like he was watching her from somewhere quiet, just waiting to see if she'd stand up again. So she did. The center helped her enroll in a youth program focused on art and storytelling. Every Friday, they held an open group where anyone could draw, paint, write, or just sit in silence. The first time Lila joined, her hands shook as she picked up the pencil. She hadn't drawn in years. But something inside her told her to try, and she drew him. Not just his face, but the moment. The night sky. The flash of cameras. The thin figure of a girl frozen by fear. And the man who walked toward her with a coat and a calm smile. The sketch wasn't perfect. Her hands were rusty. But when she was done, she couldn't stop staring at it. It wasn't about Keanu's fame. It was about what he gave her in that moment. Dignity. When Dana saw the drawing, she asked softly, "May I show someone this?" Lila hesitated. "Who?" "His team," Dana said. "Just to let him know how much this meant to you." Lila bit her lip. Then she nodded. A few days passed. Then one morning, as Lila helped Rosa set the breakfast table, Dana walked in holding a small envelope. "This just arrived," she said with a knowing smile. Lila froze. She took the envelope with shaking hands and opened it. Inside was another handwritten note. Dear Lila, I saw your drawing. It's beautiful. Not because it's about me, but because you saw something kind in a moment where most would have seen nothing. You have a gift. And more than that, you have something rare, truth in your heart. Not many do. I'm proud of you. Stay strong. Keep creating. And never doubt that you matter. Cadaped to the bottom of the letter was something else. A pass to a small private art gallery in the city. At the bottom, a note was scribbled. I'll be there on Saturday. Hope to see you too. Lila's heart stopped. Do I go? She asked Dana, almost afraid of the answer. If you feel ready, Dana said. This choice is yours. Lila looked down at the letter. Her fingers brushed over the word proud. That word echoed in her heart. She had waited so long to hear it from anyone. Now it came from someone who didn't owe her anything. On Saturday, she wore a simple blue sweater and jeans. Her shoes were borrowed from the donation closet. Her hair was tied back neatly. She looked in the mirror before leaving. For the first time, she didn't see someone broken. She saw someone beginning again. The art gallery wasn't large. The outside was plain, almost hidden between tall buildings. Inside, the walls were lined with quiet pieces. Nothing loud, nothing famous. Just moments captured by people who had something to say, even if the world had forgotten to listen. Lila walked through slowly, her pass held close. Her drawing wasn't on display, but she felt it in every room. People around her whispered softly, admired the art, and smiled at strangers. Then, near the back wall, she saw him. Keanu stood with a quiet expression, hands folded in front of him. He wasn't surrounded by cameras. No one crowded him. He looked like just another visitor, but Lila knew. She stopped walking. He turned. And when his eyes found hers, he smiled. Not a wide grin. Not a celebrity smile. Just a quiet, real one. The same smile that had wrapped around her like the coat. He walked over slowly. You came, he said softly. Lila nodded. You invited me. He looked at her closely, then at the letter in her hand. Are you doing okay? She thought about it. About everything. The cold nights, the shelters, the drawing, the center, the garden, the note, the warmth. I'm trying, she said. That's all anyone can ask, he said, and you're doing it well. She looked up at him, unsure what else to say. Then Keanu reached into his jacket and pulled out a small notebook. He handed it to her. I carry this everywhere, he said. I write in it when I don't want the world to hear me. Now I want you to have it. Draw in it. Write. Whatever you need. Lila opened the notebook. The first page had a single line. Your story matters. So tell it. She pressed it to her chest. For the second time, he gave her something more than a gift. He gave her belief. The voice inside her after that day at the gallery. Something changed in Lila. Not around her, but inside. The world still moved the same. Buses still rumbled through crowded streets. Strangers still passed without a glance. The city still buzzed with noise. But Lila had found a quiet voice within herself. A voice she hadn't heard in a long time. A voice that whispered, You belong here too. Back at the center, she held the notebook close. She didn't draw in it right away. She waited, listened, watched. Then, one afternoon, as the rain tapped softly against the windows, she picked up a pen. Her hands didn't shake this time. The first page after Keanu's message remained blank. She turned to the next and began to write. Not a poem, not a story, just pieces of memory. The sound of my dad's beer bottle hitting the table, the way the shelter smelled like cold rice and sweat. The night a woman shouted at me for sitting too, close to her bench. The way Keanu Reeves looked at me like I mattered. She kept writing. Page after page. words pouring out like water from a dam that had waited too long to break. She wrote until her fingers hurt, until the pen ran out of ink, until she could barely see the lines through her tears, and for the first time, the pain didn't feel like something to hide. It felt like something to shape. Dana noticed the change in her. "You're not surviving anymore," she said. "You're living." Lila looked at her. "What's the difference?" "Surviving is hiding your fire," Dana replied. "Living is learning how to let it burn without fear." One evening, during their weekly art session, Rosa leaned over and asked, "You ever thought about telling your story out loud?" Lila froze. "Like talking? In front of people?" "Yeah," Rosa said. "They're starting a new group next week. Story night. It's optional, no pressure. But I think your voice could help someone." That night, Lila stared at the ceiling, notebook pressed against her chest. Her heart was loud, her thoughts louder. Could she do it? What if her voice shook? What if people looked at her the way they used to, like she was less? Then she remembered Keanu's words. "Your story matters, so tell it." She said yes. When the night came, she sat in the back of the room, notebook clutched tightly in her hands. The lights were soft. The circle was small, maybe 12 people, each with their own storms behind their eyes. One by one they stood and shared their pieces. Some read poems, some told stories, some just spoke one line and sat back down. It wasn't about performance. It was about presence. When it was her turn, Lila's knees wobbled as she stood. The notebook felt heavy. Her heart beat so loud she was sure they could all hear it. But then she looked around the room and saw only softness. She opened to the first page she had written in. "I don't remember the last time someone said my name before he did," she began, voice trembling. "I was invisible. Then I was seen." The room was still. She read slowly, her voice rising with each word. Sometimes she paused, just to breathe. Sometimes her hands shook, but no one looked away. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment longer. Then came soft claps. Not the loud, forced kind. The kind that told her, "We heard you, we feel you, we're with you." Afterward, Rosa hugged her tight. "That was amazing," she whispered. "It was scary," Lila said, wiping her eyes. "The best things usually are," Rosa replied. As the night ended, Dana handed Lila a small folded card. "This came in earlier today," she said. "From someone who couldn't be here tonight but wanted you to have this." Inside was a short note. "Dear Lila, I heard you were sharing your story tonight. I couldn't be there, but I want you to know I'm proud. It takes courage to speak. Even more to speak truth. Keep going." Lila closed her eyes. The words felt like sunlight on skin that had been cold for too long. Days turned into weeks. Lila started helping around the center, guiding new girls who arrived lost and scared, just like she once did. She shared her story with those too afraid to share their own. She offered her art, her voice, her time, but most of all, she offered hope. One evening, Dana pulled her aside. "There's an event next month," she said. "It's a small talk on youth recovery and voices that matter. They're asking if you'd like to speak." Lila felt her breath catch. "Me?" "Yes, you," Dana said with a warm smile. "You're becoming a light, Lila, and others need to see it." It scared her. The thought of standing in front of strangers, of telling her story on a stage instead of a circle. But when she opened her notebook later that night and saw that first message again, "Your story matters," she knew the answer. The girl who once shook in silence was now learning to stand in the light. The girl who stood for others, the day of the event came with gray skies and soft drizzle, as if the world was holding its breath with her. The community center where the talk was being held wasn't grand. The chairs were simple. The lights modest, the audience quiet. But to Lila, it felt larger than life. She stood behind the curtain, holding the worn notebook Keanu had given her. It had become more than just paper and pages. It was her anchor, her mirror, her second heart. "You can do this," Dana whispered behind her, gently resting a hand on her shoulder. Lila nodded, though her knees trembled. This was different than story night, different than art class. These were strangers, officials, donors, volunteers, people with polished clothes and practiced smiles. But somewhere in the front row, she knew he would be there too. She hadn't seen Keanu Reeves since that afternoon in the art gallery. But Dana told her he had confirmed he'd be attending quietly, without announcement. "He doesn't like attention," she had said, "but he never forgets those he helps." Her name was called. Lila stepped forward. The room was still. She reached the small podium, placed the notebook in front of her, and looked up. Eyes were watching, ears were listening. And then she saw him, Keanu, seated in the front row, dressed. Simply no cameras around him, hands folded on his lap. He gave her the smallest nod, gentle, silent, strong. She took a breath. "My name is Lila," she said softly. "And for a long time I thought I was invisible." The room didn't move. Ran away because no one said my name. No one asked if I was okay. I spent weeks on the street believing that the world didn't care. Then one night, a man walked through a crowd and handed me his coat. He didn't ask me who I was. He just saw that I was cold. She paused, letting the silence wrap around. Her words. That coat saved me. Not because it was warm, but because it told me that I existed, that someone noticed, that I mattered. Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. After that night, I was given help, support, a place to sleep. But more than anything, I was given belief. From people who didn't know me. From a man who never needed to do anything, but chose to act anyway. She opened the notebook and held it up. This was his once. He gave it to me, told me to tell my story. So I'm doing that. Not for pity, not for praise, but for the next girl who's out there now, cold and lost and waiting for someone to see her. A few people wiped their eyes. I'm here to say that being seen can change a life, that kindness doesn't need to be loud to be powerful, and that the people you help today, they might be the ones who help others tomorrow. She closed the notebook. Thank you. The room erupted in soft, emotional applause. Lila stepped down, her legs shaky but her heart steady. As she moved, back behind the curtain, Keanu stood quietly and followed. Outside, in the quiet hallway away from the crowd, he found her. "You were incredible," he said, his voice filled with pride. She smiled, eyes watery. "I was terrified." "Good," he replied. "That means it mattered." Lila took a deep breath. "I never thought my story would matter." "It always did," he said. "You just needed the right moment to hear it." There was a pause. Then she asked, "Why me? Out of all those people? Why did you stop for me?" Keanu looked at her, eyes calm and steady. "Because I saw myself in you," he said. "A long time ago, someone gave me a hand when I was lost. I've never forgotten that. I just do my best to pass it forward." Lila looked down, tears sliding silently down her cheek. "Thank you," she whispered. He gently touched her shoulder. "No, thank you, for showing everyone what hope looks like." Months passed. Lila's story spread, not through headlines or media, but word of mouth. People spoke about the girl with the notebook, the one who turned pain into purpose. She began volunteering at the center full-time, helped build new art programs, mentored other girls with stories like hers, and every Friday, she opened the notebook again, filled more pages. One page read, "The night I stood on a stage and didn't shake anymore." Another read, "The man who gave me a coat, and with it, my voice. And, finally, near the end of the notebook, I was seen. And now I see others. Lila never chased the spotlight. She never needed it. Her story, like Keanu's kindness, stayed quiet, steady, real. And somewhere in a small home with shelves full of books and walls lined with paintings, Keanu Reeves sat one night reading a letter from her. Dear Keanu, you changed my life with a coat. But more than that, you gave me something priceless. Belief. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. I'm doing my best now to see others. And I will keep doing that. For as long as I live. Lila folded the letter and smiled. In the end, it wasn't about fame or grand gestures. It was about a moment, a choice, a single act of kindness in a cold world, and how it warmed not just one girl's life, but everyone she touched after.